I still remember the first time I saw Allison. It was late spring May, I think, and she was standing under the awning of a bookstore, flipping through a paperback while trying to stay dry from a passing storm. I was across the street, headed to grab lunch, and something about her presence just held my attention. She looked content, not distracted by the rain, not checking her phone, just completely absorbed in whatever she was reading. I crossed the street without even realizing why, and by pure luck, or maybe something bigger, I walked into that bookstore too. I never believed in fate before that day, but I'd be lying if I said something didn't shift for me the moment we locked eyes. I asked about the book she was holding. She smiled and told me it was terrible, but that she couldn't stop reading. That made me laugh. We started talking, and 30 minutes later we were sitting in a little coffee shop next door, drinking overpriced lattes and swapping stories like old friends. That was the beginning. The next few months were a blur of long walks, midnight calls, discovering shared taste in music, and learning everything about each other. She worked in marketing, full of ideas and energy, always thinking 3 steps ahead. I was quieter, more methodical, working in IT at the time and still figuring out what I wanted long-term. But we balanced each other. She brought me out of my head, and I grounded her when things got chaotic. We moved in together a year later. Our first apartment was tiny, one of those old walk-ups where the windows stuck in the summer and the radiator clanked in the winter, but we loved it. Sunday mornings were for pancakes and jazz records. Friday nights were for takeout and laughing over cheap wine. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. By the time we got married at 26, we'd already been through the highs and lows that most people don't face until years in. Job changes, financial scrapes, family drama, figuring out how to be 2 people building one life. But we always came back to each other. And when we stood under that oak tree on the edge of her parents' property, saying our vows with just a few close friends and family, I genuinely felt like I was stepping into the rest of my life with the right person. Now, more than a decade later, we live in a quiet suburb just outside the city. A 2-story house with a wraparound porch and a backyard big enough for our kids to run around in. Clara is 7 now, and Oliver just turned 3, both full of curiosity and chaos. Most days feel like a whirlwind of school runs, work emails, laundry, spilled juice, and bedtime stories. But there's peace in that routine, you know? Allison works part-time from home now, managing campaigns for a few long-term clients, and I run my own small software company. It's not flashy, but it's steady, and it gives me time to be present with my family. We have a good rhythm. Mornings start with coffee and sleepy kisses, evenings wind down with quiet dinners, and sometimes a show we're binging together. We still tease each other about the little things, her need to organize the fridge by color, my habit of singing badly in the shower. Life's not perfect, but it feels full. People always tell you marriage is work, and they're right. But it's the kind of work you don't mind doing when you're doing it with someone who feels like home. That's what Allison has always been to me, home. One of the things I've always appreciated about Allison is how she builds traditions around ordinary moments. Not the kind you post about on social media, but the quiet, consistent rituals that slowly become the heartbeats of your life. Like Friday night board games with the kids, even when we're tired. Or that she always bakes banana bread on the first cold day of fall. Or how every Sunday, without fail, we walk to the park as a family, no phones, just the 4 of us and whatever the day brings. Clara has Allison's laugh, sharp and sudden, like it surprises even her, and Oliver has her eyes, a deep green that shifts in the light. Watching Allison with them is something else. She has a way of making each of them feel like the center of the universe. She knows exactly how to meet them where they are. With Clara, it's art projects and little heart-to-hearts when she's feeling sensitive. With Oliver, it's tickle fights and bedtime stories read in exaggerated voices. I've caught myself just watching her sometimes, struck by the quiet power in her presence. She doesn't try to be perfect, she just shows up, over and over again, and that's what makes it real. Our marriage isn't flashy. We're not the couple posting vacation selfies or grand romantic gestures. But we've got our rhythm. Mornings are a dance. Me making the coffee while she packs lunches, Clara negotiating wardrobe decisions, Oliver yelling for a snack he already had. Chaos, yes, but familiar. Comfortable. There's an intimacy in knowing someone so well you can communicate in glances, finish each other's sentences, or sense their mood just by how they walk through the door. Work keeps us both busy, but we've always carved out time for each other. Usually once a week, we'll order in after the kids are asleep, sit on the back porch with a glass of wine, and just talk. About anything. Sometimes it's light, sometimes deep, but it's our space. No distractions, no responsibilities, just us remembering who we are outside of all the roles we play. Vacations are usually low-key, renting a cabin up north, visiting Allison's sister out west, or road tripping to the coast. But every summer we spend a long weekend at this lake house we found by accident during our second year of marriage. It's nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, and a dock that probably should have been replaced 10 years ago, but it feels sacred. That's where Clara caught her first fish. Where Allison and I stayed up late playing cards in the glow of citronella candles. Where we've written pages of our family story, year after year. There's comfort in knowing someone's got your back, even when things get hectic. And that's how it's always felt with Allison. We're partners in the truest sense. We split the bills, the chores, the childcare. We vent about work and laugh about the absurdities of parenting. We hold each other up when one of us is running on empty. I wouldn't say life is perfect, it never is. But there's a kind of steady happiness in knowing that, at the end of the day, you're coming home to someone who's in it with you. That's the kind of love we've built. And for a long time, I thought that was all we'd ever need. There's something I've come to realize over the years. It's not the big moments that shape a life together. It's the quiet, unnoticed ones. The sleepy smiles in the morning, the shared glances across the dinner table when the kids are being ridiculous, the way she'll absent-mindedly reach for my hand while we're walking through a parking lot. That's the real stuff. That's the glue. Our home isn't fancy, but it's filled with warmth. The living room walls are cluttered with family photos, Clara's messy first birthday cake, Oliver asleep on my chest, Allison and I covered in paint from when we decided to DIY the nursery. There's a slight lean to one of the bookshelves because I insisted on building it myself, and she still teases me about it. The kitchen is always a little chaotic, with drawings on the fridge and school papers stacked next to cookbooks. But when you walk in, it feels lived in. Loved. We each have our quirks. Allison has this thing where she needs the bed made a certain way, sheets tucked tight, pillows fluffed just so. Me? I can't go a day without checking the weather forecast, even if we're not going anywhere. She rolls her eyes, I grin, and somehow that small dance repeats itself nearly every morning. We've grown into each other that way, filling the spaces between with the kind of familiarity that can only come from years of choosing each other. The kids are at that perfect age right now, old enough to hold conversations, young enough to still believe in magic. Clara asks a million questions about the world. She's curious, like her mom, but thoughtful in a way that sometimes surprises me. Oliver is full of energy, always climbing something, always sticky for some reason. He's the kind of kid who laughs with his whole body. Some nights we'll all end up in the living room, building blanket forts or watching old cartoons, and I'll catch Allison watching them with this look, half peace, half awe. Our date nights have become more like date afternoons lately. Sometimes we'll sneak away on a Saturday, leave the kids with my sister, and drive out to this little diner off the highway that serves the best pie I've ever tasted. It's nothing fancy. But sitting across from her in that booth, hands wrapped around mugs of coffee, legs brushing under the table, it still feels like we're those 20-somethings discovering each other for the first time. And through it all, there's always been this sense of we. Our goals, our routines, our choices, everything filtered through the lens of us. We've saved together, planned together, dreamed together. We talk about what we'll do when the kids are older, where we'll travel, what kind of old people we'll be. I always pictured Allison in a garden somewhere, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, cursing at squirrels. I'd be beside her, pretending to help but really just stealing strawberries. That's the life I saw ahead of us. At least, that's what I thought. They say your gut knows before your brain catches up. I used to think that was just something people said after the fact, to make sense of things in hindsight. But now, I'm not so sure. It started small. Little things. Things you'd never notice if you weren't paying close attention. But when you've been with someone for over a decade, you know their rhythms, the way they move through a day, the tiny rituals they don't even realize they keep. And when those start shifting, you feel it. Allison started going to the gym more. That wasn't odd in itself. We'd both been trying to get healthier since Oliver was born. What caught me off guard was how suddenly intense it got. She was going 5 days a week, sometimes even 6, and always at the same odd time, right after work, just before dinner. She'd say it was the only time the gym wasn't crowded, which made sense, until it didn't. She used to come home chatty. You know, talking about her day, venting about clients, telling me some funny story about Clara or a new thing Oliver said. Lately, not so much. I'd ask how her day went and get fine, or same as always. And when I asked how the gym was, she'd shrug and change the subject. One night, I asked if she wanted to watch a movie after the kids went down, and she told me she was too tired. That's not unusual. What was weird was that she stayed up anyway, sitting on the couch, texting with someone. I asked who it was, casually, just making conversation. She said it was a friend from work. That's all. Then she put her phone face down and said she was going to bed early. Again, none of this was damning. Just off. You start noticing how much your partner doesn't talk when you're used to them filling a room. The quiet gets loud. And in that silence, your brain starts connecting dots you didn't even know existed. There was one night, it was around 9:30, when she said she was going to run to the store to pick up some cereal and dish soap. Nothing unusual, right? Except she was gone for over an hour, and when she came back, she didn't have either. Just a random bag of groceries and some excuse about the store being out of stock and stopping by a gas station instead. I didn't push, but something stuck. The next day, I checked the store's website just out of curiosity. The products were in stock. I told myself I was being ridiculous, paranoid, but I couldn't shake the unease. Then I started to notice her phone was always with her. Not just in the room, but physically on her. Like it was glued to her hand or in her back pocket, even when she was doing something that didn't require it. She used to leave it charging in the kitchen overnight. Now it was on the nightstand. Face down. Always. A couple of times, I walked into the room, and she clicked it off fast. Just instinctively. Like muscle memory. I'm not proud to admit this, but I started paying closer attention. Not accusing. Not snooping, at least not yet. Just watching. Tracking patterns. Listening more than I spoke. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be that guy, the one who makes a problem where there isn't one. The one who accuses his wife just because she's acting different. But still, there was something there. I felt it in my chest. In the quiet. In the way she started smiling at her phone more than she smiled at me. And maybe the scariest part was realizing that I didn't know what to do with that feeling. By this point, I had become hyper-aware of everything. The things she said, the things she didn't, the tone of her voice, the way her eyes darted when she answered certain questions. I told myself I wasn't paranoid, I was just observant. But there's a fine line between those two things when your mind starts filling in blanks you wish weren't there. It's strange how quickly suspicion can bleed into everyday life. I started noticing gaps. Not lies, exactly, just moments that didn't add up the way they used to. She'd mention she had a late client call, but then come home dressed like she'd been out, not working. Or she'd say she went to the gym, but she didn't look like she'd worked out. No sweat, no gym bag. Sometimes even her hair looked freshly done. I remember one night, maybe a month after the cereal run incident, when she came home later than usual. I was cleaning up dinner with the kids and asked if she'd had a good session at the gym. She paused, just a beat too long, and said, "Yeah, it was all right," without looking at me. Then she kissed the top of Oliver's head and went straight to the bedroom. Later that night, I found one of those tiny perfume vials in the trash in our bathroom. She wasn't the type to wear perfume to work out, and I hadn't seen her wear it around me in weeks. It felt ridiculous to be standing over the trash with a half-used sample bottle in my hand like I was some kind of detective. But in that moment, it felt like a clue. Like a thread tugging at something I didn't want to unravel but couldn't leave alone either. The intimacy between us started to shift, too. She wasn't cold, just distracted. Preoccupied. There was a time when we couldn't walk past each other without touching. A hand on the lower back in the kitchen. A kiss on the cheek in passing. Lately, it felt like we were ghosts occupying the same space. Not hostile. Just disconnected. One night, we were sitting on the couch after putting the kids to bed, both pretending to watch a movie. I turned to her and asked, "Are you okay? You've seemed a little distant lately." She blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Just feels like we haven't really been us lately." She smiled, too quickly. "Work's just been a lot. And I think I'm hitting a weird burnout patch, honestly. Anything I can do?" She shook her head. "You're doing everything already. I just need to push through it." And that was the end of the conversation. She turned back to the screen and leaned into the armrest instead of me. I kept telling myself it was a phase. Maybe it was stress, maybe hormones, maybe just a natural lull that long-term couples go through. But the problem was, while I was spinning every possible explanation in my head, I couldn't ignore the feeling in my gut that none of those were the real answer. I didn't have evidence. I didn't have a smoking gun. All I had were moments, glances, gaps, and a growing sense that I was no longer the only man occupying her thoughts. And that realization? It started to eat at me, quietly and relentlessly. You don't realize how loud silence can be until it's sitting across from you at the dinner table. It was a Wednesday night. Nothing remarkable about it. The kids were laughing over spaghetti, Allison was scrolling through her phone between bites, and I was just watching. Not judging. Not angry. Just watching. Studying. Every little thing felt rehearsed now, like she was acting out the part of the present, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. She looked up once and caught me staring. Smiled, said, "What?" Like it was a joke. I wanted to say everything. I wanted to say, "I don't know who you are when you think I'm not looking." But I didn't. I just smiled back and said, "Nothing." And that was the truth, really. Because that's what she was giving me lately, nothing. The days started to blur together. Same routine, same house, same woman, but it didn't feel like my life anymore. It felt like I was watching it from the outside. And that feeling, it's exhausting. You start doubting your own thoughts. Is this normal? Am I imagining this? Do all couples drift like this? But then things kept happening. Small, jarring inconsistencies that chipped away at whatever peace I had left. One evening, she came home in a new hoodie I'd never seen before. I asked about it, half smiling, trying to be casual. She paused again, just for a beat, then said, "Oh, I've had this for a while. It must have just gotten buried in the closet." That would have been fine. But 2 days later, I saw the same hoodie, same brand, same exact color, tagged in a local gym's Instagram post. It was on the guy 2 rows behind her in one of those group class shots. She wasn't even tagged. I just noticed her in the corner of the frame, mid-squat, had turned toward him like he'd said something funny. I didn't say anything. I don't even know why. Maybe I wasn't ready to know. Maybe I was still hoping it was nothing. And the phone. God, the phone was always with her. She'd never been secretive before. She used to leave it lying around, unlocked, forgotten on the counter. Now it was like a limb. If she wasn't holding it, it was face down, within arm's reach. Notifications silenced. Always on silent mode. When I made a joke about her being glued to it, she said, "You know how many emails I get in a day. It's nonstop." And that was the end of it. I found myself lying awake more often than not, listening to her soft breathing next to me, watching the rise and fall of her back, and wondering if she was dreaming about someone else. The worst part? I missed her. Even with her right there, I missed her like I hadn't seen her in months. It's a strange thing, to grieve someone who hasn't left. I started snapping more over small things. A late arrival home. An unanswered text. A forgotten detail. She'd roll her eyes or ask why I was being weird. I'd say I wasn't, but I knew I was. I was unraveling slowly, quietly, from the inside. Still, I had no proof. No messages. No lipstick on collars. Nothing concrete. Just instincts. And that's what made it worse. I was starting to feel like a crazy man in his own house, surrounded by shadows no one else could see. And when you're in that place, when you're drowning in doubt with no rope to pull, you start wondering if it's even worth finding the truth. But I couldn't let it go. Something was wrong. And I knew, deep down, that something was coming. The day Oliver was born should have been one of the happiest of my life. And in some ways, it was. The waiting room. The anxious pacing. That weird mix of fear and excitement as they wheeled Allison away. I still remember holding Clara's hand, her small fingers wrapped tight around mine, asking if her baby brother was going to be tiny like a kitten. When the nurse finally walked in and told me I could come see him, I felt my chest clench with something close to awe. A new life. Our second child. Another piece of this family we had built from the ground up. Allison looked exhausted but radiant, her hair clinging to her forehead, her eyes glassy but smiling. She held Oliver like she'd known him her whole life. And when she looked at me and said, "Isn't he perfect?" I nodded, kissed her head, and said, "He's beautiful." And he was. He is. But there was something, God help me. I noticed it right away, and I hated myself for it. But it was there. The shape of his face. The color of his hair. The way his skin tone didn't quite match mine or Clara's. It was subtle. Not enough to raise a flag for anyone else. But enough to whisper at the back of my mind. Enough to unsettle me in a way I didn't want to admit, especially not to myself. I told myself I was tired. That I was just imagining things because I was already in my head too much. Because of everything over the past year, her distance, the phone, the gym visits, the strange timing. I told myself not to do this. Not here. Not now. Not when we had just brought a child into the world. I shoved it down and tried to focus on the moment, on Allison, on Clara meeting her baby brother with that wide-eyed wonder only a child can carry. For a little while, I managed to pretend everything was fine. I watched my wife coo over Oliver, saw her body relax as she fed him, her eyes soft with that new motherfuck. She looked happy, really happy, and I wanted that to be enough. But over the weeks that followed, the feeling didn't go away. It grew, quietly, like water dripping behind a wall. You don't notice the damage right away, but you start to smell the rot. Every time someone commented on how Oliver looked just like someone, but couldn't quite say who, I felt it. Every time someone said, he doesn't look much like Clara did as a baby, I felt it. And then one night, when my mother casually said over dinner, he's got such unique features. You sure he's yours? As a joke, I laughed, but my hand tightened around my fork so hard I left a mark on the table. I tried to shake it off. I really did. I told myself that genetics are messy, unpredictable, that kids don't always look like their parents, that he was mine because he had to be, because the alternative wasn't something I was ready to entertain. But then I started seeing it, really seeing it, in his eyes, in his smile, a familiarity that didn't belong to me or to Allison's side of the family either, a resemblance to someone I couldn't place. And the more I looked, the more that sense of wrongness took hold. I started avoiding family photos. I'd catch myself zoning out during feedings, staring at him like I was trying to solve a puzzle with no edges. Allison, meanwhile, seemed lighter than she had in months. She was glowing again, laughing more, humming around the house like she used to. She talked about how complete our family felt now, how perfect everything had turned out. And I wanted so badly to believe it. But it felt like I was standing outside a house I used to live in, looking through the window at a life that wasn't really mine anymore. I wasn't sleeping. I was going through the motions, work, diapers, bottles, bedtime stories, but my mind was always racing. And every time I looked at Oliver and felt that twinge of doubt, guilt wrapped itself around me like barbed wire. What kind of father questions his own child? What kind of husband doubts his wife after everything they've built? But I couldn't silence that voice in my head. Not anymore. It wasn't just about late nights and locked phones now. It was flesh and blood. It was the child sleeping in the next room. A beautiful, innocent little boy who might not be mine. There's a strange kind of silence that comes before you do something you can't take back. The night I ordered the DNA test, I sat at the dining table long after everyone else had gone to bed. Allison had left her water glass out. Clara's crayon drawing was still stuck under the salt shaker. The baby monitor glowed softly on the counter, picking up Oliver's steady breathing. Our house looked so normal, so calm. But inside me, something was fracturing. I wish I could say I had some noble reason for finally doing it, that I needed peace of mind, or closure, or clarity. But the truth is, I was tired. Tired of guessing. Tired of convincing myself that the weight in my chest was paranoia. Tired of smiling through conversations that felt like performances. I was losing pieces of myself trying to believe a lie I hadn't even confirmed yet. The kid arrived 3 days later. I kept it hidden in my car, tucked under the seat like some dirty secret. I waited until a Saturday morning when Allison went out with the kids for a mommy and me class. I swabbed my own mouth, then Oliver's. My hands were shaking. I labeled everything, packed it in the envelope, and dropped it in a mailbox like I was mailing away my sanity. The weight nearly broke me. I checked the tracking number 10 times a day. I couldn't focus on work. I barely slept. Allison started noticing. She asked me one night if I was okay, and I said I was just stressed about a project deadline. She kissed me on the forehead, told me I needed to take care of myself, and rolled over to sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about how easy it was for her to rest beside me while I spiraled in the dark. When the email finally came in, I sat in the garage to open it. It felt safer there, like the truth couldn't quite find me if I wasn't inside our home. I clicked the results. Scanned. Blinked. Scanned again. I reread the same sentence maybe 5 times before I really let it settle in. Probability of paternity, 0%. No match. No ambiguity. No room for hope. Oliver wasn't mine. My hands went numb. I sat there for what felt like an hour, staring into nothing, the car growing hotter by the second. Sweat clung to my back, but I couldn't move. I wanted to throw up, scream, tear something apart. But I couldn't even form a thought. Just silence. After a while, I got out and walked inside. Allison was in the kitchen, feeding Oliver in his high chair, bouncing her foot absently to some song on the radio. She looked up and smiled. I looked at Oliver. He smiled too, so innocent, so unaware of the weight his existence suddenly carried. And for a brief second, I hated them both. Then I hated myself for thinking that. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I said nothing. Not yet. I needed to breathe, to process. I went back out later that night, stood in our backyard and looked up at the sky. I remember thinking, if I open this door, there's no closing it again. But it was already open. The lie was out. And somewhere deep in my bones, I knew this wasn't just about Oliver. This went further, darker, deeper. The quiet suspicion I tried so hard to suppress for years came roaring back with violent clarity. So the next morning, I did what I had to. I ordered another test. This time for Clara. I got the second test result a week later. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at the email like it was some kind of final judgment. It didn't feel like a question anymore, not really. But part of me still hoped, in that quiet, desperate way you do when you already know the answer but you're praying to be wrong. Probability of paternity, 0%. Clara wasn't mine either. There was no air in the room after that. Just silence. A vacuum where my past, present, and future had been. 11 years. That's how long we'd been married. 7 of those years, I'd been raising a daughter who wasn't mine. I'd swaddled her, rocked her to sleep, sang her lullabies until my throat went raw. I'd been there for every scraped knee, every nightmare, every whispered question about how the stars worked or why rain made her sleepy. And now somehow, I was supposed to believe that none of it was real. That all of it, every bedtime story, every hug, every laugh, was built on someone else's DNA and my wife's lies. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Something colder took over. I waited until Allison got home from picking the kids up. I sat at the kitchen table with the test results printed out beside me, face down. She came in like it was any other day, setting her keys down, calling out a soft, tired, "Hey, babe," as she walked past me with Oliver in her arms. I didn't say anything. Not right away. I let her get the kids settled in the living room. Then I walked in, stared at her, and said her name. Allison. She looked up. "Yeah. Sit down." Her smile wavered, just slightly. "Is everything okay?" "No. It's not." I handed her the 2 sheets of paper. She read them. Her face didn't change at first. Then her lips parted, just barely. Her eyes scanned the pages again. I watched the color drain from her face in slow motion. She didn't say a word. "How long?" I asked. She swallowed. Don't lie. Not now." Still silence. Then, finally, it was a mistake. A one-time thing. I didn't think. A one-time thing that lasted 10 years and produced 2 children? My voice cracked on the word children. "You want to try again?" She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "Don't. Just don't. I don't want the script. I don't want the tears. I want the truth." Her voice broke. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I stepped forward. "You had 2 kids with another man while married to me. While I raised them. Loved them. You lied to me every single day. Every birthday, every holiday, every photo on the fridge. They're yours in every way that matters." She shouted suddenly, and that snapped something in me. "No. They're not. Not anymore." I pointed toward the door. "You're going to pack your things. And you're going to leave. Tonight." Her eyes widened, like she couldn't believe I was serious. "You can't just throw us out. They're your children." "No, Allison. They're his. And you? You're nobody to me now." She stood, angry now. Desperate. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to erase everything. We built a life." "You build a lie," I said, my voice cold. "And I'm burning it down." That's when she snapped. "Fine. You want the truth? The real truth? It was your best friend. The kids are his." My breath left my body. She said his name like it was a victory. Like it was the final twist in the knife she'd already been turning. He worked for me. Had for years. I trusted him with my business. With my family. With everything. And he'd been screwing my wife behind my back the whole time. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I just turned, walked to the hallway, and opened the office door. Inside was his employee file. I picked it up, went to my computer, and terminated him from every system, every contract, every point of access. 1 click. Done. Allison followed me, her voice high, frantic. "What are you doing?" "Firing him." "You can't do that." "I just did." "What about us?" she asked. She actually asked that. "What are we supposed to do now?" I looked at her, this woman I had once vowed to love for the rest of my life, and I didn't see a partner. I didn't see the mother of my children. I saw a stranger. A liar. A parasite who had fed on my loyalty and devotion and twisted it into something unrecognizable. "You go to him," I said, my voice even. He's their father. You made your choice a long time ago. Now you can live with it. I didn't help her pack. I didn't say goodbye to the kids. I couldn't. Not then. I heard her crying as she left. I didn't follow. The door closed behind her. And for the first time in years, the house was quiet. Truly quiet. But not peaceful. Not yet. Starting over isn't cinematic. It doesn't come with a sweeping soundtrack or some grand epiphany while standing on a cliff. It's quiet. It's mornings when you wake up and forget for 2 seconds that your life has changed, before it all comes crashing back in. It's sitting alone in a house that suddenly feels 3 sizes too big. It's walking past an empty bedroom and realizing you don't even know what to do with the silence. After Allison and the kids, no, her kids, left, the house felt hollow. I didn't rush to fill it. I didn't start redecorating or move furniture just to make it look different. For a while, I let it breathe. Let myself sit in the wreckage. I think a part of me needed that. Not to wallow, but to understand the weight of what had happened. I had lost a marriage, a family, a best friend, and an identity I had worn for over a decade, all in the span of a few weeks. You don't come back from that overnight. People kept telling me to focus on myself. I hated that phrase. It felt shallow, like throwing a bandage at a bullet wound. But maybe there was something to it, because one morning I got up early, before the sun came up, and drove to a trail I hadn't been to in years. I didn't run. I didn't even walk fast. I just stood there for a long time, letting the cold air burn in my lungs, watching the sky turn from purple to gold. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that almost resembled peace. Not happiness. Not yet. But a quiet kind of stillness that let me breathe again. I started going to the gym again. Not to see anyone. Just to feel like my body was still mine. I spent longer hours at work, not as a distraction, but because I wanted to rebuild what I had let slide while my world was unraveling. I closed the chapter on my former best friend completely, fired him, locked him out of everything, and made it clear there'd be no second chances. My lawyer handled the rest. Allison tried contacting me a few times. Emails, voicemails, even a letter, handwritten, begging me to talk. She said the kids were confused. She said Clara cried every night and asked why Daddy didn't want her anymore. That part nearly broke me. I had to remind myself she wasn't mine. I had loved her like my own, yes, but I couldn't carry a lie for the sake of comfort anymore. I didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And then, a few months later, I met someone. It wasn't intentional. I wasn't looking. But life has a strange way of sneaking up on you when you stop trying to control it. Her name was Rachel. We met at a bookstore, of all places, just 2 strangers reaching for the same novel. She made some joke about having good taste, and I laughed, for real, for the first time in months. We talked. Nothing heavy. Nothing intense. Just simple. Human. We got coffee the following week. Then lunch. Then a long walk around a park while we shared stories about our worst dates and our weirdest childhood memories. I didn't tell her everything right away, but I told her enough. She didn't flinch. She didn't offer platitudes. She just listened. And for someone who had spent so long feeling like a character in someone else's story, that kind of presence felt like water to dry earth. Rachel isn't a replacement. I'm not trying to rewrite the past or pretend it didn't happen. I still think about Clara sometimes. I still hear Oliver's giggle in the quiet moments. But I'm learning how to hold grief and hope at the same time. I'm learning that starting over doesn't mean erasing what was, it means choosing, every day, not to let it define you. One night, Rachel and I sat in my living room, a bottle of wine between us, rain tapping at the windows. She asked me if I believed in second chances. I didn't answer right away. But after a long pause, I said, I'm starting to. And that's the truth. It's strange how the human heart can hold so much at once, anger and forgiveness, loss and love, bitterness and peace. I never believed that before. I thought people moved through life in phases, happy or broken, grieving or healing. But now, I know better. The truth is, you carry all of it with you. The trick is learning which parts to feed, and which ones to finally let go of. It's been almost a year since that night at the kitchen table, since the moment everything cracked wide open, and I saw my life for what it really was. I've thought about that moment a lot, not in the way that hurts, but in the way you remember the start of a storm. You don't go back to it, but you never forget the shape of the clouds. Allison and I haven't spoken since the day I threw her out. She tried more than once, but I drew a line and stuck to it. I'm not proud of that. But I needed to survive, And I couldn't do that if I kept inviting poison back into my bloodstream. Maybe one day, when the edges don't sting so sharply, I'll revisit that door. Not to reopen it, but maybe to nod in its direction and say, that happened, and I lived through it. As for Clara and Oliver, I won't lie. I still think about them. A lot. I still keep the drawings Clara made in a folder in my closet. I still remember the feel of Oliver's tiny hand wrapped around my thumb. They were never mine in blood, but they were mine in heart. And I don't think that kind of love just disappears. It doesn't demand anything in return. It just is. But I also know that seeing them now would tear me open in ways I've just barely managed to stitch back together. So I carry them with me quietly, gently, and I move forward. Rachel and I are still together. It's not perfect. Some days I still flinch when she laughs too long at a text message. Some nights I wake up unsure of where I am. But she's patient. She never tries to fix me, never tries to rush me past the parts that still ache. She shows up. She listens. She sees me, not as the man I used to be, or the broken one I became, but the one I'm building now, piece by piece. We took a trip a few weeks ago, just the two of us, a cabin by a lake, no Wi-Fi, no plans. One morning, we sat on the dock with our feet in the water, and she asked me, "Do you ever wish it had all gone differently?" I thought about that for a long time. Then I said, "No. I wish she had been honest. I wish I had known the truth sooner. But if none of it had happened, I wouldn't have found this version of myself. The one who's still standing. Because that's what remains. Not the betrayal. Not the lies. Not even the rage. What remains is me. Still here. Still breathing. Still capable of love. And for the first time in a long time, not waiting for the next blow to come. This isn't a happy ending. It's not a perfect one. But it's mine. And that, I've learned, is enough.